Well, hi everyone, and welcome back. Wow, week three already. We are just moving right along, aren't we? So, this week for our reading, we're going into scope management. Remember, we started off our process groups last week when we started talking about integration management. So, this week it's chapter five, and we're going to take a deep dive into managing the scope. And we're going to talk about what scope is and how we go about doing that. So, some important notes for upcoming weeks, and you're going to need to get this done. If you have not done this already, you need to get it installed, Microsoft Project, because beginning in week four, you're going to start using Microsoft Project. So if you haven't done that, get it done. Also, go through the tutorials in the textbook. Finally, there's a video in that will help you. It's a 16-minute video on how to use Microsoft Project. Now, I am going to run that video in class, so you can either watch it on your own or pay attention in class, because what this video is going to do is show you exactly what you need to do in order to use Microsoft Project. And a lot of students really complain about how hard Project is. And it is, it's hard, don't get me wrong, it's tricky to learn. But this video in a short 16 minutes is going to show you everything you need to get done what you need to get done. So I highly encourage you to come to class, pay attention, or view the video on your own, either way. So what is a project scope? A project scope refers to all of the work that will be involved in creating the products as a result of the project and the processes that we're going to use to create them. So whatever it is that we are going to deliver as part of the project, the scope involves everything that's needed to get to that point. Okay, and a deliverable is the product produced as part of the project. It can be hardware, it can be software, it can be documents. So you can have multiple deliverables within a project. So for example, week three this week, your team is delivering a handful of items which can be considered project deliverables, okay, as well as the final, for example, website that you would be creating, that would be maybe your final deliverable. So scope management includes all of the processes that are needed to be done in order to define and control that project scope. So the scope management process, and you're going to see this kind of diagram with each of the different process groups. You're going to be planning the scope. Basically, it means determining what the requirements are and how you're going to manage those requirements. You're going to collect requirements. Then you're going to analyze and define the scope of work. You're going to create the WBS, which is the work breakdown structure. And what that does is it organizes the project scope, everything that needs to be done, into work packages or smaller deliverables that can then be manageable components. Okay, validating the scope. You want to make sure that you have in place how are you going to accept what's being done and validate that what's being done really meets what's required. And then, of course, controlling scope and changes. This is where we get into talking about change control, because inevitably change occurs in a project. Scope changes. And if you remember correctly, the triple constraint: scope, time or schedule, budget or cost. Those are the three things. So we're really getting into the very first part of the triple constraint and learning how to control changes to scope. I'm not saying we don't change the scope, because scope change happens all the time. It's a matter of managing and what needs to be done, and often you need to go back and possibly you might actually need to go back and include what is referred to as re-baseline. You may have to baseline the project again, which is modifying the WBS, and you'll learn about that this week. So here's the things that you need to know in terms of scope management. So you want to know what is a scope management plan. And what is a requirements management plan? What is change control? And how does change control help us manage requirements and scope? And how does a change control help us manage the triple constraint? What are techniques for gathering requirements? There are a number of them. What are some of them, and when is it effective to use certain techniques? What is a WBS? What's a work breakdown structure? How do we decompose our deliverables, our scope of work, into work packages in order to create a work breakdown structure? And then when we do that, how do we organize our WBS in such a way that the work is being done in a good flow? So in other words, in a work breakdown structure, we do not have things happening out of sequence. You don't do something down here and then, but it requires work that's inputs from later on in the process. So it's very important that you have your work breakdown structure organized into work packages, decomposed into work packages that flow the right way. You also want to know what that term baseline means. And you want to have a good understanding of when you originally baseline a project, then how changes come in, impact the baseline, and may require you to re-baseline the project. Why is it to your advantage to re-baseline a project? What is a Gantt chart? What are some approaches to creating a WBS? Why is the WBS so important? And what is a WBS dictionary? Obviously, this week we focus a lot on WBS. And then, how do we validate our scope of work? What is a variance? You'll want to understand the term, what is a variance? And then, how can software help us reduce changing project requirements? And let me rephrase that. How can software help us to mitigate the impact of changing project requirements when a project requirements change? Okay, well that's what I have for you for this week's reading. So on to the next video, and we'll talk about the what we're going to do for the assignments this week.